It was dark. Mary Magdalene arrived in the dark, and John wants us to know that it was dark. As she arrives in the midst of her grief and despair, she finds something unexpected. The tomb has been rolled away. The stone has been rolled away from the tomb. And there inside, what is she to find? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts combined, O God, be acceptable unto thy sight, O God, who is our strength and our rising Redeemer. Amen. It can be a scary place being on the edge of the unknown. Do you catch it that twice Mary, in arriving to the tomb, has to bend down? Got some anxiety here, right? Behind me, I've got a spotter. Mary was pretty alone. Isn't it great to have community? Mary twice, as she comes to this space, bends down to see what is there. And in order to get that closer look, she bends down and she goes and she sees there into the tomb, in the darkest place that she can go, 2 angels. And she runs away. She runs away to tell them about this panic of the grave robbery that has happened. And when they all come back, and especially when she has these moments alone before the men have returned, that's when she pauses, she looks up, and she sees him. The gardener? And then the words that strike us. First, simply, Mary. Can we hear our names in this? Being seen, what it is to be known. In order to come to this day, we have to crouch low, having ascended from whatever our expectations of Easter might be in order to listen to the grief on the ground. We have our ears and our hearts opened incredibly, and we keep in mind that Easter is with us in everything. In his book, Ladder to the Light, Choctaw elder and Episcopal priest Stephen Charleston tells the story of visiting a parish hall in a New England church several years ago. He writes that on all accounts, this room was filled with successful people, those who had likely climbed corporate ladders and ivory towers. These were well-read and well-informed souls, churchgoers with comfortable incomes. Charleston observed, however, that these were not confident people, especially when they had their guards down a little bit in spiritual space. They were full of worry. And he asked them in the midst of this worry, because he had been traveling around this country, he asked them to name one institution, one public system in the U.S. in which they maintained full confidence. He went off a list, naming systems one by one. You feel confident in the political system? There was this uncomfortable silence, and here we have chuckles. You confident in the judicial system? You confident in the healthcare system? And this one hurts. Are you confident in religious institutions? Charleston allowed the silence to settle in, perhaps the knowing chuckles too, because it felt too true, this anxiety that had been brewing for a long while and felt to be at its ongoing culmination. And it hit them like it probably hits us, the weight of not believing that communal networks are working well, or that they will work well in the future. Of doubting that the social systems on which we depend for healthy communities will function in the ways that we hope that they might. And the truth is that many in our society have never experienced these systems to work in their favor. And those with the greatest potential to have their needs met even now, the kinds of folks sitting in that parish hall with Stephen Charleston that day, well, it was telling that even they were distressed and silent. Charleston, in that moment, crouching, bent with them in their grief, wrestling with the questions and the anxiety. He would go on to hear this fear talking to what he identified as conservatives and progressive Americans, a baseline of fear that transcends boundaries. I feel it in my body as I talk about it. I felt it on the ladder when I was trying to climb down and be present to Easter. It is the baseline that we sometimes can't get away from. And you might say, Pastor, why today? Why do you bring it and put it in our face? But that's what Easter does, is it speaks truthfully to us, turning the outside and inside upside down. And so the shadow of the cross comes to us this morning as we harbor our own fears about what has unfolded since the last April. How many more innocent people, the global poor, prisoners, immigrants, school children, have met their deaths because of the violence and anxiety of people in power. And there have been those who've been harmed because they dared to critique or expose what is broken. It feels as if the tomb this year is not quite big enough to house all of our accumulated heartaches. But there was Stephen Charleston crouching. Mary Magdalene bends over for a word, something that might tell us that our whole future is not being robbed from us. Grounded in the reality of his Choctaw identity with an ancestry that walked the trail of tears, Charleston has looked to different Native traditions that have endured the collapse of social structures by the centuries, ever inspired the extraordinary spiritual grounding of fellow Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island. Those who've had their languages banned, their religious practices forbidden, sacred objects stolen to put in museums, and families scattered. Charleston writes, our ancestors survived because they could adapt, even in the most difficult and challenging circumstances, even in the face of wars and disasters. Renewal is about seeing the past as a doorway into the future. The more we enter into the strength of the ancestors, the more we emerge into the courage, wisdom, and commitment we need to live in the present. Charleston's conversations led him to renewed spiritual listening for messages that could be shared into the hushed parish halls, the social media pages, and overall anxious hearts like ours. Those who need and want and believe that things can be different. His messages of hope became a ladder to the light. And then the rain descended. He focused particularly on ancestors of the Southwest like the Hopi, who had hold fast to the tradition of the kiva. This is the image that is on the front of your bulletin depicting such a place. A kiva is an underground ceremonial space with an opening in the center, entered by climbing down a ladder. It is a place of prayer and transformation. Unlike cathedrals that draw our eyes upward, right? The kiva intentionally invites spiritual movement downward, a bending into the earth. Among the Hopi, the story of human beginnings is not a story of being placed upon the earth. Life emerges steadily from within the earth. People learned wisdom underground, and when they were ready, when they were inspired, when they could see the light, they emerged through the threshold to find the earth and all the glory of creation. And it was here that they made a home above ground, supported by the vegetation and the animals around them. Here, communities took shape and then migrated across the globe. The Hopi, known as keepers of peace, are charged with keeping relationships of the world in balance, descending into kivas, ceremonial places to return close to the generative energies of the earth. There they connect to the ancestors and the spirit still teaching them. And then, when the time is right, they ascend with ongoing responsibility to live into the light. We know that the Hopi themselves have historically faced a horror of violence, and they persist to this day in their spiritual labors on behalf of all creation. John tells us that Mary comes to the tomb while it is still dark. There is something that we keep learning from this. Like the Hopi stories of emergence, John's gospel does not rush us past the darkness. Resurrection begins not above ground in full light, but below, in silence, in trust, and a trust in the earth itself. Many of us come to Easter like Mary came to the tomb, still in the dark, still carrying questions. We at KC have lots of doubts that we lean into, and thank goodness. And certainly we're still unsure about the systems on which we can depend and the Caesars that we face in our own day. And yet we have this one earth home that insists, if we are to survive, it insists on our cooperation. The beauty, as I saw it this morning in the sunrise, we bend low together, sometimes daring to prostrate before a God who keeps up with us and leads us onward. Just as Mary reaches to cling to the body of Jesus, we may cling to old ways of doing things, weighed by worry and what is not working. But when destructive forces threaten the earth, we come back to this story of Jesus. Perhaps it lands on us like that steady rain. A story of peoples who have survived their own horrors in his day and do not succumb. The culture, the stories, the places of sacred memory survive. And with each Easter, we are invited to rise again. Charleston writes, using the spiritual metaphor of the kiva, that we are all in the kiva together. Whatever our politics, whatever our religions, whatever our cultures, we are all in the darkness together. We can see that as a frightening place to be and begin fighting among ourselves. Do we see it today? We can be afraid and we can scramble for the ladder, pulling one another down in the process, trying to race to the top. Or we can take this moment as a period of deep spiritual formation, as I've seen it taking shape in the Kitamukundi community. We can renew our faith in the Spirit and in one another. And then we can climb. We can keep climbing. We begin our descent. We begin our descent down and then our ascent upwards together. Do we dare to emerge from the holy darkness? We take each rung one step at a time, but as I have just been on this ladder, it can be a little harrowing. God is still creating life, and God is still creating new life, insisting on our participation. But we're going to have to get outside of ourselves a little bit. Even if our bodies at this point can't do the climbing, we know that one by one, together, we're going to get there. Now, this could have been the Sunday that the pastor fell off the ladder. that's not what you're going to remember about today. You're going to remember this image as one that invites us upward and outward, one that invites us from the truth of where we are grounded, like the Hopi, in the wisdoms of the earth, and learning from indigenous persons about how to survive an apocalypse. And with this image of the ladder, we're going to trust that we are agents of this Easter world. And with reverence, humility, and purpose, we can even make a difference in our political, in our judicial, in our health care, and in our religious institutions. Amen. Invite the musicians to stand together to come and share with us this song. You may remember biblically that there is the image of the ladder as it happens with Jacob in the book of Genesis. He's having a dream, a fervent dream in the middle of the night because he's just tried to steal his brother's birthright, and he's going off, and there's an angry Esau. And so as he flees, he finds a stone, and he puts his head upon that stone, and he dreams. And in the middle of that dream, he has the image of angels ascending and descending from heaven, and that is a powerful ladder. And so similar today, as we remember that ladder and the echo of what it means to be connected to all of creation, we also join in on Easter morning, descending and ascending on this ladder of hope together, this ladder at Easter. Let us sing.